Madam Speaker, I rise to lead the debate and have read for the second time in this Honourable House the bill shortly titled Banking Bill 2023 or Banking Amendment Bill 2023. As you quickly recognize, Madam Speaker, we are sticking to the point that, as far as possible, to have the first reading, give it a break so that it can be looked at by the members on the opposite side and our nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis, and then come back for the second and third reading, except where there might be a bill that is so urgent or don't have any type of controversy to it or possible. And therefore, I want to say to the AG and the leader of government business that the people do appreciate that type of approach. And the purpose of this bill, Madam Speaker, is to amend the Banking Act, Chapter 21.01. Madam Speaker, this bill, like many bills and regulations drafted by the competent team at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, have been outstanding for quite some time. And I would say here, Madam Speaker, this has been outstanding for some time, and it puts St. Kitts and Nevis last when it comes to all the other countries in the OECS with respect to passing this amendment in the House. And so we seek quickly to resolve that, Madam Speaker. And that is why I said it has been outstanding for some time since before we took office in August 2022. Dr. Antoine, Madam Speaker, who is the governor of the central bank, visited us at the cabinet level. And one of the things that came up was the slow passage of legislation when it comes to the ECCB's transformation agenda, especially from St. Kitts and Nevis. And in that meeting, we said that we recognize that the slowness of the passing of these amendments present a significant strategic risk to the ECCB and what they're trying to achieve, Madam Speaker. And therefore, that is why we think it is very, very important that we act and that we act now. The Monetary Council at its 81st meeting on 24th February 2015 approved a new banking bill for the regulation and supervision of banking business in the sub-region. The Banking Act was passed in St. Kitts and Nevis in 2015 and operationalized in 2016 to provide for the regulation of banking business, the establishment of a single banking space in the currency union, and for incidental and related matters. Madam Speaker, in 2017, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, in consultation with the banking industry, undertook a review of the Banking Act of 2015, following passage, and identified certain areas in the Act as either impractical or a challenge to the effective and efficient operationalization of the Act. A ministerial subcommittee of the Monetary Council was therefore established to advance the first tranche of amendments through the consultative process prior to finalization and subsequent passage by the respective parliaments, Madam Speaker. On 11 April 2017, ECCB organized a consultative and legislative drafting workshop in St. Vincent and the Grenadines under the aegis of the Ministerial Subcommittee chaired by Prime Minister Dr. the Honourable Ralph E. Gonsalves. The workshop was attended by Eastern Caribbean Currency Union Attorney General, Parliamentary Council, Financial Secretaries, and other representatives of the Ministries of Finance, representatives of the ECCO Bankers Association, Local Bankers Association, the Deputy Governor of the ECCB, and other representatives of the ECCB. I hope I'm not going too fast. Madam Speaker, the ECCB engaged member territories in bilateral discussions on the draft with a view to having the same finalized. Madam Speaker, the amendments can be categorized into three broad areas as follows. Drafting clarifications. Certain provisions in the Act were intended as requiring amendment to ensure clarity of intent and consistency in language. Examples of these include the following. An anomaly was identified in Section 5, where reference is made to conducting banking business. However, the term that is intended to be used throughout the Act and is indeed used in all other areas of the Act is carrying on banking business, Madam Speaker. The use of the former terminology has potential to create interpretational issues and therefore must be adjusted accordingly. Madam Speaker, continuing, Section 54 speaks to licensed financial institution that may acquire or establish a subsidiary company. In its current formulation, only future subsidiaries will be captured. However, the provision is intended to not only govern future subsidiaries, but also existing subsidiaries. The section would therefore be amended to give effect to that intent, Madam Speaker. Some of the definitions are there are certain defined terms that needed to be amended or added in the interpretation section to eliminate ambiguities. Key examples include 1. The introduction of term branch. This is significant as financial institutions will be expected to pay annual license fees for each branch that operates in the ECCU. The replacement of the term capital base with the term Tier 1 capital, as the latter is a term with which the industry is more familiar. Narrowing of the definition of the term relative, the current expansive nature of the definition is problematic for the industry as securing compliance with the requirements of the Act upon which this definition has some bearing is proving impractical and near impossible, Madam Speaker. And there were also some policy issues, Madam Speaker, which I'll point out here. They are very critical that I do as I go through them one by one so that our people can understand, especially those who are in the area of banking. Issues have arisen during the implementation process that require policy adjustment. The following key areas have been the subject of analysis. Financial requirements and limitation. The Act imposes limitation on certain activities of banks, including the following. 1. Prohibitions on declaring or distributing dividends during any financial year that the licensed financial institution experiences a loss. Very critical to us here in the Federation, Madam Speaker. As you know, the National Bank suffered a loss last year. It is probably the first loss in its history that it had suffered. And as a result, a decision was made not to pay dividends. And I think that could have been the first time in its history that dividends may not have been paid since dividends would have started, Madam Speaker. And so had this been in place, this would have given the bank the opportunity to pay dividends to the shareholders even if it had made a loss in the year past. And so this is critical, Madam Speaker. The other issue is restrictions on investments in real estate. And lastly, restrictions on unsecured lending to employees to 50% of the annual remuneration of the employee. This again would have tremendous positive impact, Madam Speaker, for those who are employed in the institutions. So that is why it is important that we bring these amendments and catch up with our fellow OECS member states. The amendments confer discretion on ECCB to grant approval to financial institution to 1, engage in the activities referenced in 1 and 2, referenced above, and 2, in the case of 3, to lend unsecured to employees up to 100% of the employee's remuneration. Audit and information. The current provisions and auditing require financial institutions to change their external auditors every 6 years and the lead and concurring partner every 3 years. The current time frames for the rotation of external auditors were considered too short in light of the limited number of auditing firms in the region. The bank therefore proposes to revert to the previous position, which would allow financial institutions to change the external auditors every 9 years and the lead and concurrent partners every 6 years. This is critical as well, Madam Speaker, especially knowing that there is a major bank here in St. Kitts and Nevis that has not been audited since 2018. Madam Speaker, continuing, license fees based on the definition of foreign financial institution in the Act, financial institutions that are CARICOM nationals but are non-ECCU nationals would be considered foreign and therefore be subject to higher licensing fees than local financial institution, where we're speaking about ECCU nationals, according to the fee structure. We are advised by CARICOM that the fee structure is inconsistent with the prohibition against discrimination based on nationality, only under Article 7 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and that financial institution incorporated within the CARICOM but outside the ECCU should not be charged higher fees than their ECCU counterparts. In an effort to ensure compliance with the existing treaty obligations of member states, the fee structure has been revisited to allow CARICOM nationals that are non-ECCU nationals to pay the same licensing fees as ECCU nationals. I have to remember that we have our good friends who are doing the sign language, Madam Speaker. But what this is pointing out, I think everyone wants to go to what this is pointing out, Madam Speaker, is very, very critical, especially because we are looking at other financial services coming from outside ECC region. Let's say we go as far down Trinidad, that is not a part of the region, the small, or we go up to Jamaica and so forth. They are part of CARICOM. And as you know, as part of CARICOM, we are seeking to build closer relations. And those closer relations, we know, will result in mutual benefit for all of us. So therefore, this seeks not to discriminate against those who are outside of our currency union and give them a real opportunity to participate in our financial sphere. And so that is why it is important. That is why we said that these amendments are important so the bank can achieve its strategic transformation. We cannot be holding back the bank. The bank is here in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's a reason why the bank was situated here. We have a very strong indigenous bank in the National Bank. We had, of course, other conditions that would favor having the headquarters here. And so why is it we are last on the list of countries that have amended particular pieces of legislations, or put in place pieces of legislations that would allow the bank to transform in the new climate in which it finds itself? Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are some miscellaneous things that I want to look at as I come close to wrapping up. And I would say Clause 11 of the bill amends Section 44 of the Act, the minimum paid up or assigned capital provision. The amendment would allow foreign branch banks to hold assigned capital in the currency union in the form of specified assets as defined in Section 57.7 of the Act as approved by the Central Bank. The treatment of discharged bankrupt persons under the fit and proper provisions. A person who has been declared bankrupt would be required to seek the prior approval of ECCB to serve as a director or officer of a licensed financial institution. Very critical, Madam Speaker. Why is that critical? I mean, every year, however often, you might change a board of a financial institution. And you don't want people on that board who are, their finances are not in good standing to come now and lead a financial, or help to lead a financial institution. And that deals specifically with that. So persons would know, well, you know, I can't put up my name to be on the board because I'm not in good standing. Introduction of an appeals process for persons aggrieved by decisions of the ECCB under the fit and proper provisions. That if somebody is determined to be unfit, that person, in the spirit of natural justice, should have an opportunity to appeal a decision. And so, Madam Speaker, this seeks to do that. Introduction of a process by which officers and directors could be vetted by ECCB to determine compliance with the fit and proper criteria prior to appointment or nomination election to boards of licensed financial institutions, respectively, Madam Speaker. We have had issues in the past, and therefore what we seek to do is to make sure that the legislation is in place so that if you know you're not fit and ready, don't even ask the question, Madam Speaker. In clause 44 of the bill, amend section 178, the secrecy of information provision. Section 178 provides for specific expectations to the obligation to treat banking information as secret and confidential, Madam Speaker. Very critical. The amendment would allow licensed financial institutions to disclose confidential information where necessary in the conduct of due diligence in relation to a potential transaction. This amendment will be particularly helpful to the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation. The proposed amendment would be the legal authority for a licensed financial institution to disclose confidential information to the ECAAMC. It's critical, and we see why it is important, why due diligence is important. However, the spirit is not to disclose anybody's information to whoever wants that information, but that the relevant persons can ask for the information so that the bank can do the checks and make sure that the bank is not exposed or any financial institution is not so unduly exposed. Section 186 of the Banking Act is being amended to provide for, one, the establishment of a bridge bank for an initial period of 12 months with the possibility of extension by the ECCB for up to 4 years. Two, specific circumstances under which bridge bank status may automatically be terminated. That is, by a fluctuation of time, sale to or amalgamation with another institution or satisfaction of the capital requirements. Mandatory receivership or liquidation only where bridge bank status terminates by a fluctuation of time and retention of discretion by the ECCB to initiate receivership and liquidation even prior to the expiration of the period of the bridge bank. Very important as well, Madam Speaker. This type of transformation we are talking about, the bridge bank here, this is where the ECCB wants to go, and we in St. Kitts and Nevis, we cannot be holding back this very prestigious institution and an institution that has proven itself. Madam Speaker, Dr. Antoine said one of the things that the Banking Amendment Bill does is to ensure that the people who serve on boards of financial institutions are people of integrity, so they will not pose a risk to the financial system, as I said before. The bill clarifies the fit and proper criteria for members who sit on boards as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is not about some abstract matter. The caliber of persons being appointed to the financial board touches and concerns real people. This is why we have supported the election of professional people to the board of the St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla National Bank. Madam Speaker, one of the things that I made sure while the process of appointing people to the National Bank was taking place on the shifting of the board was to make sure that all who came on the board were in compliance. Even before this bill was passed, I asked that ECCB look at who we are appointing to the board, and those who were not in proper order, they had an opportunity to present and say why, and if they have an opportunity to correct it, they had an opportunity to correct it before they would have been appointed to the board. So we have practiced this, but to now see this come to the Parliament to be passed and be put in so that people know from the onset, if I am not in good standing, I'm not even putting up my hand. And if the bank deems I'm not in good standing, I can have a day to be heard or a moment to be heard and present my case and correct it where I can correct it. Madam Speaker, the bill also provides for natural justice and due process, as I just expressed. Also, further, Madam Speaker, right now under the Banking Act, if you had a business and the business has failed and you've been declared bankrupt, you are essentially banned for life from serving on a board of a financial institution. That life sentence is too harsh, Madam Speaker. And that is what we are saying. If persons are able to clear up their situations, then they can be given the opportunity once again to be a part of a board of a financial institution. Madam Speaker, the bill, if passed, would modernize the law to give persons who have been declared bankrupt a chance to be considered. The COVID-19 pandemic turned some people into bankrupts. Some people became bankrupt through no fault of their own other than the negative fallout from the pandemic. So should those people totally be excluded as a result of a pandemic over which they had no control? These things happen in life, Madam Speaker, and we must make sure that natural justice always is present and serve the people well. We therefore wholeheartedly support the aspect of the bill which seeks to give people a second chance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, with this type of bill is of utmost importance to St. Kitts and Nevis, which is the fourth largest economy in the CCU, with a gross domestic product of just under $3 billion. St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank is the largest single bank in the ECCU with $3.6 billion. Strengthen and regulatory laws which govern the operations of the National Bank is therefore critical. So strengthening these laws is critical. This is what we are seeking to do today, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what we really want to do is to strengthen the Banking Act, give it the flexibility that it deserves, allow it to transform, and allow the ECCB that space that it requires to continue to be a leading financial institution, an institution that has proven itself, an institution that has kept our currency safe and protected. Madam Speaker, I will go on to say that our ECC, here in the ECCU, we have enough in reserve, Madam Speaker. We are required to have about 60% of reserve of foreign exchange, but here in our region we have about 90-something%, well above what is required, which means that we have been practicing sound financial principles here to ensure that we protect our currency and we protect our region. And therefore, it is expected that laws and new laws would come, amendments would come to keep us on track to where we are seeking to continue the development and advancement of the region or the sub-region financially. And therefore, Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, I want to wish this bill safe passage and to say to those at the ECCB and through the sub-region that St. Kitts and Nevis is ensuring that by the time we meet again, we will not have last. It's embarrassing, Madam Speaker, when you have last on a list and the bank is in your country. We will ensure that we don't have last. So we are going to move up the ladder, and at the next meeting, I'll be able to lift my head up instead of trying to keep it down, Madam Speaker. May it please you.